Hi everyone. Today, let's start with new case study. Imagine you have work with customer and you are designing for a small application that will receive a web request containing encoding geographical coordinates. So calls to app will occur infrequently. And also the customer ask you to need to minimize the cost. So from your perspective, which compute solution should you recommend? I think we have to think for three things. First one, we have Azure Functions, then we have Azure Container Instance, then we have Azure Batch. But how we can differentiate between three compute to provide the solutions to customer? So again, this is a small applications, and we need to minimize the cost, and we need to work with customer to fill his purpose. So each of the solutions serve a different purpose, and you should choose the one that's the best fit your needs or customer need based on scale and type of workload you are running. So let's go to my screen and try to explain or differentiate between them to select the one and it can be a fit with customer. So now if we open the Azure Calculator, it will be when we try to work in pricing and go into compute, we have a lot of options here, and let you review again our purpose for customers. The customer actually he have a small applications and he try to minimize the costs. Okay, so this is the main purpose you have to understand. These are small applications we receive a web request containing encoding geographically, and the calls to app infrequently, and the customer purpose he need to minimize the cost. So we have, as we mentioned, we have three options. We have Azure Functions, we have Batch, we have Azure Container Instance. This is suitable for customers, but how we can differentiate and how we can give the customer the best solution he fit with his requirement. This is our question. So if we go here to our board, which I like, let's first one, we have three things here. We have, okay, we have Azure Functions, and here we have Azure Container, Azure Container Instance, okay, and also we have Azure Batch. Okay, so let's differentiate between them. First one for Azure Function, it's this one. It will be a serverless. Okay, serverless computing that enable you to run event triggers. Then, and also it will be a single purpose for code snippet in the cloud without having to manage any infrastructure. Okay, then what's ideal? What is the best option or ideal for this? Will be for small scale. Okay, and infrequent requests. Again, Azure Functions, it will be a serverless, it will be for a small scale, it will be for infrequent requests. Okay, then go with Azure Container Instance. Azure Container Instance solution for running individual containers in the cloud without having to manage fully fledged container orchestrators environment. This will be a make sense. Okay, and what is ideal for Azure Container Instance? It will be also for a small scale. Okay, and also for a stateless applications. Okay, so again, Azure Container Instance solutions for running individual containers in a cloud without having to manage a full-fledged container orchestrator environment, and ideal, as we mentioned, for a small scale and also for a stateless applications that need to run in containers environment. Okay, let's go with Azure Batch. Azure Batch here, a cloud scale batch processing solution that enable you to run a large scale. Okay, and also high performance computing workload. High performance computer workload. What is ideal for this one, for this Azure Batch? Azure Batch is ideal for a big data, processing. Okay, and sometime for scientific simulations. Okay, again, Azure Batch, it's a cloud scale batching process solution that enable you to run a large scale. This is the first one, and also for a high performance compute. Okay, ideal for a big data processing and sometime for scientific simulations. So let's remember again our case with customer. The customer, he need to be have a small applications, okay, and the call for this app occur infrequently, okay, and he need to work on cost because makes sense because his small applications. Okay, we explain Azure Function and Azure Container Instance and Azure Batch. I hope this one will be more clear, but I need to be more clear. Let's start, for example, with Azure Batch. So let's go to this diagram. I think this diagram will help us to more. Now we have Azure Batch, then we have Azure Functions, then we have Azure Container Instance. Okay, let's start with Azure Batch, this one. Why I can't use Azure Batch? Okay, as we explain, you could use Azure Batch for this type of a small application, but it not be a most cost-effective solutions. Azure Batch, this one, as we mentioned, is designed for a large-scale batching process and high-performance computing workload, and it's not optimized for small scale and infrequent requests. Okay, so if you took with customers Azure Batch in this our situation and this is purpose with customer needs, it's not good because as we mentioned, it will not be a most cost effective solutions, and Azure Batch, it will be designed for a large scale batching process and for a high performance computer workload and not optimized for small scale and infrequent requests. In addition to higher cost, Azure Batch require a certain level of setup and management overhead. For example, We have to create and manage a virtual machine and creating a schedule batch job, and also and monitoring for status of job. So this one will not be a good options. Okay, then let's go with Azure Container Instance.